right, here we go. I think I'm gonna read now, I guess. See, I'm already starting to hack. All right, here we go. My name's Sean Thomas McDonnell. I'm going to be reading a little story I wrote called Little Man and the Moonlight Darlings. I did this for the Top in Fiction Inanimate Objects competition, which I lost. What? But yeah, I hope you all have a fun time with this one. I had a very fun time writing this. And I feel like I get something a little different every time I read it to myself. And so here we go. He was lying on his back in the sun beneath a street sign half covered by the flaring branch of a sycamore. I rubbed my eyes like a cartoon hobo finding a shiny coin. And picked him up. He stretched and yawned, tilted his head this way and that, and then the little fucker bit my hand. I asked him why he'd bit me. He said it was because I was so big and he was so little. An understatement, to be sure, as he was only 3 inches tall. I set him back where I found him and went home to clean the bite. After that, I showered, dressed, and went to meet Colette and Danny down at our old haunt, the Dubliner. Danny was already halfway into her Pilsner when I arrived. As I approached the table, she nodded to my hand. I told her, found a little man by the tracks. He was teeny tiny and half naked. I grabbed her beer and took a swig. She called me a big weirdo and punched me in my arm. Colette arrived late, as usual. The 3 of us laughed and reminisced about old times. But during our 3rd drink, Colette said she'd found out her new neighbor was a sex offender. He'd served 3 years for raping a 13-year-old girl in Oxnard. Danny shook her head. The world is so fucked. I excused myself to the restroom where I tried to dislodge the little bits of shit off the porcelain bowl with my piss. But they were stubborn. When I was done, I zipped up and left the bar without saying goodbye. On the way home, I asked the Lyft driver to drop me off by the tracks. The little man was still sleeping beneath the street sign. He was as cold as ice. Wake up, little man, I said. I know I'm big, but I'd like for us to be friends. The little man stretched and yawned, and after a moment of reflection, nodded agreeably. I dropped him into my jacket pocket, and off we went. I made a small bed in my sock drawer and tucked him in tight. I even sang him a pretty song my dad used to sing me. Canopy atop knotted limbs makes dappled walkways for the moonlight darlings. Romance bent whispers in the still. A deserted world for the moonlight darlings. But in the night, do killers kill? It really makes no difference. For the magic of the light is real, and it demands it. Worship from the moonlight darlings. In the morning, little man was lying on the pillow next to me. I watched him sleep for over an hour, and by the time he woke up, I'd already mapped out our entire day. We'd take the train to the city for the matinee, then get a bite to eat at my favorite restaurant, Chippy's. But little man had other plans. He wanted to bite people. I asked him why he wanted to bite people. Because, he said, some people were too big. Some people were so big and filled with such darkness that they needed to be bit. I reminded little man that I was big and asked if that meant I needed to be bit too. He said he had tasted my blood and it was moonlight clean. I told him that most people were probably just as clean. He said that he'd met many people who didn't like the moonlight at all. People, he whispered, who liked to stay hidden. We went back and forth like this for a while, but I'm not one to diminish another's personal experience. And eventually we agreed that some people probably weren't moonlight clean, and that some people, but not all, probably needed to be bit. Later that day, we popped over to Colette's to say hello. She was sitting on her porch looking at her phone, eating cheese crackers. We talked about the weird overcast but warm weather, what we call earthquake weather in California, and about books, shows, movies, and that shitbag in the White House. While we chatted, we watched a group of neighborhood boys and girls playing soccer, and whenever one made a goal, we shouted, "Go, lo, 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 lo." Little man was snoozing in my pocket. The rise and fall of his chest made me feel lazy and content. I wished I were a cozy little man sleeping in a pocket. Across the street, a big man came to his window and looked out at the kids playing soccer. "That's him," said Colette. "That's that fucking rapist. Piece of shit. Look at him staring at those kids. They don't live on the street. They only come here because it's a cul-de-sac. Less cars, you know? They think it's safer here. Think I should warn them?" "Probably," I said and nodded. "Hey, you mind if I grab a beer?" Colette said she grabbed one for me on her way back from the restroom. Just then, little man woke up. He looked up at me and asked me why my face looked the way it did. I told him it was because there was a man across the street that was too big. He asked me if he was so big he should be bit. I said, yeah, probably he should be bit. Probably he wasn't Moonlight clean. Colette came out with a cold beer and asked me if I needed a bottle opener. No, I said, little man would help me. And he did. He popped the cap right off that bottle, no problem. Then the rascal bowed. Colette rolled her eyes and giggled, told me about a short story she'd read recently by Patricia Highsmith about a man in a button. I'm not sure how to feel about it. It was hard to focus on Colette's words. The big man in the window was distracting me, and little man wouldn't stop talking about how many people he'd bit over the years. I put my finger to my lips. Thankfully, little man got the message and settled down. Little man and I made our way up the moonlight dappled walkway to the big man's house and looked through the transom window. He was sitting on a couch watching The Big Bang Theory. I tried the door, but it was locked. Little man told me to kick it down. I laughed louder than I'd meant to, but thankfully the big man didn't turn around. I told little man it wasn't so easy to kick down a door. It's not like in the movies, I said. Little man said he'd never seen a movie. After we were done, I promised him we'd watch a movie together. Maybe I'd introduce him to Twins with Danny DeVito and Arnie. Little man said he'd like that. We went around to the side of the house and found an open window. I quietly removed the screen and pulled myself up and into the cramped bedroom. The man's work boots were on the floor beside the dresser, and on the bed was a Teen Vogue magazine. Little man was wide awake, talking a mile a minute. I shushed him. The couch squeaked. The man was up and coming toward us. We hid behind the door. The man came into the room with a waft of vanilla and salami, stopped and stood perfectly still. I watched the sight of his face. His eyes were two resin beads between slats of silly putty flesh. He looked at the screenless window, trying to work out what had happened. "Hello?" he said, and moved slowly to the window where he stuck his head out, surveying the side of his home. Little man and I snuck out from behind the door and into the living room, where we hid behind a splintery crate with a dozen holes in the top. We heard the man close the window in the bedroom. A moment later, he cautiously entered the living room where we were hiding. He approached the transom at the front of the door and looked out. When he was satisfied nobody was outside, he sat back down on the couch. Little man and I made silly faces at each other for 20 minutes, occasionally peeking out from behind the crate to see what the big man was up to. Eventually, the big man's eyes became too heavy to keep open. Little man wanted to bite. I told him to chill. He was only little and I didn't want him to get hurt. But when the big man was finally snoring, I stood, stretched my legs, and asked little man if he was ready. Little man blushed, confessing he'd never actually bitten anyone but me. I asked him why he'd lied to me like that. He said dreams and opportunity don't always align, and that it was only a lie because he'd never had a friend like me before. But now he did. I sat down on the corner of the crate to think about this. Little man's confession changed everything. I had a big decision to make. A whimper came from within the crate, and a whisper, please let me go home. The big man's eyes snapped open. He stood and asked who I was and what I was doing in his house. I didn't know what to say. He looked at my hand in disbelief. He'd never seen a little guy like my little man, 3 inches tall and half naked. Little man suggested I look away, which I did. Then, little man bit the big man, and he kept biting him for over an hour. While he did this, I frowned at the crate, occasionally consoling whoever was inside. "There, there, moonlight darling," I said. "Little man will be done soon." And that was Little Man in the Moonlight Darlings. A little weird, right? Uh, Happy to field any questions here. Any, any thoughts on that? It's perfectly clear, right? Everything is super clear, not weird at all. Look at I managed to not cough that much. That's pretty good. Um, yeah, I'm so excited to have I ever been bitten? Have I ever bitten someone? I mean, probably. I don't know. I don't not nobody like recently. Oh, and when you say bite, do you mean like bite or do you mean like bite? Like in this context? Because I've never like bitten anyone like this kind of bite. I was a little bit terrified. Um, I I am I moonlight clean? I think I'm moonlight clean. I think everybody here in this chat is moonlight clean too. But you never know, you know. You never know. It's a some people are pretty good at hiding, you know. So, but I think but you're the chat people here you're giving me the vibe that you're moonlight clean. We'll just say that you are inspired. Um so next up, who do we have? We have oh, Shane Bizdock. Um who is one of my personal favorites. So I'm very excited to jump out of here and let him have the hot seat for a minute pretty soon here. But before I'm done here, yeah, I don't want to leave you. So anybody want to talk about anything? I wish I wish this was like a Brady Bunch style, like we're all just chatting because I hate being the center of attention. Well, sometimes I hate being on video as the center of attention. Um, any other questions about the story? I'm going to ask a very simple question, and I think it's like, wait, uh, yeah. Um, I want to know what you're thinking. Tell me what's on your mind. Um, what inspired the story? Thank you. That's a great question. So, two things inspired the story. Three things. Three things inspired the story. One was I found a knife a long time ago in Hayward when I was on a walk. And it was I. If you go to the story, you'll see it. I used it as the cover photo for my story, but I just thought it was like the most fucked up looking knife, like a steak knife in the middle of the industrial section of Hayward, and it just looked like it had been there for like 100 years, um, and it looked so gnarly. And I was like, "Oh, ooh, that's great!" And so I took a picture of it. I didn't take it home. I didn't put it in my pocket. Um, but that was like one of the inspirations. The other inspiration was a story by Patricia Highsmith, not the one I mentioned in this story, but it's another one, and I can't remember the name of the story, but it's really good. Where she like she's in her house, and I think it has to do with the grieving process. I have to read it again, but there's a little man in her house, like an actual little man in her house, and um, like Patricia Highsmith is if you haven't read her, it's dark, it's horror, but it's not like the type of horror that you would read nowadays. Really, it's very like literary up until it snaps. It's like uh, what is it called? It's when it switches genres like really quickly. But that's one of the reasons I like her so much because I don't know what's gonna happen. Like sometimes things happen and sometimes they don't. And when they happen, it's like on a dime and it makes me go, oh shit, what? And I love that feeling. So that's another inspiration for this story. And then the third one is just because like, how many of us haven't thought about like, fuck man, if I was like just a different type of person, there's so many people out there that I would bite. You know what I mean? Like there's some bad people out there. And I know that's terrible. I shouldn't even say that out loud, but that's what I was thinking kind of when I was going through this. But now that I've gotten, now people are watching me because I said it. Anyways, thank you all for coming to my reading. Shane Bizdock is next. Definitely check him out. And keep an eye out next week. I'm gonna be sharing some news about the book. Oh, well, that's all you get. But I'm excited, and I will see you all. I love you. That weird to say? Like not love, just like love. Bye bye.